night of April 18th, 1966, was a predator's cloak, a moonless, inky blackness over the Gulf of Tonkin that swallowed light and sound. On the steel island of the aircraft carrier USS Kitty Hawk, a city of 5,000 men held its breath. The air, thick with the scent of salt jet fuel and ozone, thrummed with a contained violent energy. This profound darkness was not a hindrance. It was a weapon system in itself. For the mission about to unfold, it was the most crucial element. Beneath the dim blood-red lighting that preserved the night vision of the flight deck crews, figures moved with a practiced, ghost-like efficiency. Their gestures were sharp, economical, honed by endless repetition into a silent ballet of preparation. They were readying 3 aircraft for a journey into the heart of a maelstrom. A Soviet intelligence-gathering trawler, a constant listening shadow on the horizon, mandated absolute electronic silence. First to launch was an E-2A Hawkeye. Its massive dorsal rotodome, already a spinning blur against the starless sky, was a harbinger of the electronic eyes and ears that would orchestrate the strike from a safe, over-the-horizon perch. Then came the moment of truth. With a deafening chest-compressing roar and a convulsive shudder that shook the 80,000-ton ship, the first A-6 Intruder was flung into the night. It didn't so much fly as get hurled from the deck, accelerating from 0 to 150 knots in under 2 seconds. Piloting this technological spearhead was Commander Ron Hayes, the formidable executive officer of Attack Squadron 85, the Black Falcons. To his right, bathed in the eerie green glow of radar scopes and cathode ray tube displays, sat his bombardier navigator, Lieutenant Ted Bean. They were a single entity. A two-man mind welded together by countless hours of training and the implicit trust required to fly into hell at 500 feet. Seconds later, their wingman, Lieutenant Commander Bill Yarbrough, and his bombardier navigator, Lieutenant Bud Romish, followed them into the abyss. Their destination was the Quang Bi thermal power plant, a critical node in North Vietnam's industrial and military grid, nestled just 12 miles north of the hornet's nest of Haiphong Harbor. This was no soft target. Quang Bi was a jugular vein of the North's war machine, and it was defended as such, ringed by the guns and newly deployed Soviet-made missiles that had already claimed dozens of American airmen. But the A-6 was no ordinary aircraft. It was a weapon born of the Cold War's darkest strategic fears, designed for this exact moment to pierce the most heavily defended airspace on Earth under the cover of night and foul weather, and deliver its payload with a precision that bordered on the supernatural. It was in essence a flying battering ram with a digital brain. Hayes and Yarbrough rendezvoused in the dark, a feat of pure airmanship and trust in their instruments, and immediately dropped their machines to the deck. They leveled off below 500 feet so low that the salt spray of the Tonkin Gulf misted their canopies. They became a pair of fleeting shadows, their engines a muted roar against the churning water. This was the intruder's domain. At this altitude, they were ghosts to the enemy's long-range acquisition radars, fleeting phantoms lost in the noise of the ground clutter. They held this gut-wrenching, high-speed, low-level profile until they were just 25 miles from the target. Then, as one, their aircraft began a gentle, computer-guided climb to 1,800 feet, the optimal altitude for their deadly cargo to arm and find its mark. Each intruder carried a staggering load, 13 1,000-pound Mark 83 general-purpose bombs, a total of 26,000 pounds of high explosive, a weight of ordnance that dwarfed the payload of most World War II heavy bombers, was destined for a single vital target. Inside the cockpit, Lieutenant Ben was not flying by sight, but by the ghostly green light of his screens. Through the complex wizardry of the intruder's digital integrated attack navigation equipment, the power plant appeared on his scope, not as a fuzzy blob, but as a coherent mappable image, a digital reconstruction of the physical world below. He was seeing the unseeable. Target acquired? His voice would have been a calm, clipped report over the intercom. The pilots separated their aircraft for the attack run, giving each other space. Hayes went in first. With a final confirmation from Bean, he depressed the pickle switch on his control stick. The A-6 shuddered violently, as in a single rippling salvo, all 13 bombs were released from their shackles. The aircraft, suddenly 13,000 pounds lighter, leaped upwards. On the second aircraft, a technical gremlin struck, and the primary release mechanism failed. Without missing a beat, Lieutenant Romish, the bombardier navigator, initiated the manual backup. His hands moving with practiced calm to override the system and ensure his entire bomb load also fell true. The North Vietnamese didn't completely know. The first concussions rocked Uong B, followed instantly by a series of massive rolling explosions that lit up the night sky like a false dawn. By the time the defenders realized what was happening, it was too late. The rhythmic flash of 37mm and 57mm anti-aircraft artillery began to blossom in the night. But they were firing at ghosts, at the sound of engines already fading into the distance. The two intruders were already banking hard, hugging the terrain again, egressing at high speed back toward the safety of the sea. A post-strike battle damage assessment flight told the tale at least 25 distinct bomb craters pockmarked the target area. The power plant was a mangled wreck of twisted steel and shattered concrete, its generating capacity annihilated. The next day, Radio Hanoi announced that waves of B-52 Stratofortresses had carried out the devastating attack. It was a telling, and for the Americans, a gratifying mistake. To the North Vietnamese, such destructive power delivered with such precision could only have come from the massive high-altitude bombers. They had not yet grasped the terrifying new reality presented by this ungainly, blunt-nosed attack jet. The A-6 Intruder had just announced its arrival, and for the defenders of North Vietnam, the night would never be safe again. To understand the A-6 Intruder, one must first understand the chilling strategic calculus of the Cold War. In the mid-1950s, the United States Navy faced a terrifying capability gap. Its primary mission in a global conflict was nuclear deterrence, the ability to project power and deliver nuclear weapons deep into the vast, heavily defended territory of the Soviet Union from carriers patrolling the high seas. This mission demanded an aircraft that could penetrate sophisticated layered air defense networks in any weather day or night. The existing fleet was dangerously inadequate. The workhorse Douglas A-1 Sky Raider, a magnificent aircraft in its own right, was a propeller-driven relic from a previous era. Early jets like the agile A-4 Skyhawk were day visual flight rules attackers, colloquially known as day trippers. They were limited by daylight and clear skies flown by pilots who relied on the Mark I eyeball for targeting. Against the nascent but rapidly advancing Soviet air defense system, they would be little more than cannon fodder. The Navy needed a new kind of weapon. The requirement issued in 1957 was for a carrier-based two-seat, all-weather medium-attack aircraft. It had to be able to fly at perilously low altitudes to avoid radar navigate with unerring accuracy over hundreds of miles of hostile terrain without visual references and deliver a nuclear or conventional payload on a pinpoint target. It was a monumental technological challenge, pushing the boundaries of what was possible with 1950s-era electronics and computer science. In 1957, the requirement was sent to 13 of America's top aviation firms. The submission from Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation, the legendary Iron Works of Bethpage, New York, a company famed for building tough, reliable naval aircraft like the F-4F Wildcat and F-6F Hellcat, was designated A-2F-1. When the design was unveiled, it was met with more than a few smirks in the aviation community. In an era of sleek, supersonic fighters, defined by needle noses and knife-edge wings, the Grumman A-2F-1 was pudgy. It had a large, bulbous nose, a thick, powerful fuselage, and a tapered tail. It was quickly and not affectionately dubbed the Flying Drumstick. Grumman's engineers were unbothered by the criticism. They were pragmatists, not artists. As they asserted, they were focused on engineering performance, not aerodynamic aesthetics. The A-2F-1 was not a fighter designed for dogfighting. It was a bomber, a pure instrument of war, and every curve and bulge served a critical purpose. The design philosophy was simple: form follows function. The A-6 was built from the inside out. That thick, blunt nose was packed with the most advanced avionics suite ever conceived for a tactical aircraft. It housed two separate radar systems, a Norden A and APQ-92 search and terrain clearance radar, and a separate A and APQ-112 tracking radar. The revolutionary cockpit design was a stroke of human factors genius. Instead of the traditional tandem seating, pilot in front, navigator, bombardier in back, Grumman placed the two-man crew side by side. This widened the fuselage, but was transformative. It fostered an unparalleled level of crew coordination, turning them from two individuals into a single, integrated mind. They could communicate with a glance, a nod, or a hand gesture. The pilot could focus entirely on the demanding task of flying the aircraft's stick and rudders, while the bombardier navigator became the master of the complex systems, a techno-mage interpreting the digital world unfolding on his screens. The soul of the A-6 was not its engines or its airframe, but the groundbreaking electronics package at its core: the digital integrated attack navigation equipment. This wasn't just a simple radar. It was a marvel of early digital computing. A complex web of sensors, computers, and displays that gave the Intruder its almost mythical all-weather capability. Digital integrated attack navigation equipment was a system of systems. It integrated the terrain-following radar, a Doppler navigation system, an air data computer, and a ballistics computer into a single cohesive unit. Its primary function was to allow the aircraft to fly at terrifyingly low altitudes at high speed in total darkness or blinding weather. The terrain-following radar would scan the ground ahead, and the flight control system would automatically adjust the aircraft's pitch to hug the contours of the Earth like a high-speed roller coaster. For the crew, this was both a lifesaver and a nerve-shredding experience. They would be hurtling through the night at over 500 miles per hour, a mere 200 feet above unseen mountains and valleys, placing their absolute faith in the green lines on their screens. For the bombardier navigator, the digital integrated attack navigation equipment system transformed him into the true commander of the mission. On his main display, he could see a radar-generated map of the ground below. He could select waypoints, identify targets, and even freeze the radar image to study it while the aircraft maneuvered. Once a target was designated, the ballistics computer took over. It calculated the precise release point, accounting for the aircraft's speed-altitude dive angle and the specific type of ordnance being carried. A steering symbol would appear on the pilot's display, guiding him unerringly to the release point. This system was incredibly complex, and in its early days notoriously temperamental. Crews joked that the A-6 was a collection of 30,000 spare parts flying in close formation. Glitches in the digital integrated attack navigation equipment system could give a crew heart-stopping moments, forcing them to abort a mission or rely on their wits and backup systems. But when it worked, it was pure magic. It gave the A-6 a capability that no other tactical aircraft in the world, including anything in the United States Air Force inventory, could match. The system was so accurate that it became common practice for other attack aircraft like A-4s or F-4s to fly in formation with an Intruder during night strikes. The formation would fly blind, and the other pilots would simply release their bombs when they saw the A-6's ordnance fall away, a practice known as buddy bombing. The Intruder was their seeing eye dog in the dark. Standardized as the A-6A in 1962 and entering fleet service in February 1963, the Intruder was a beast of burden. With a wingspan of 53 feet, it could haul up to 18,000 pounds of ordnance on 5 external hardpoints, more than a World War II-era B-17 Flying Fortress. It was not fast, with the top speed of just 685 miles per hour, well below the supersonic fighters of the day. But speed was not its mission. Its job was to get low, stay hidden, and put bombs on target no matter the time or weather. And as the conflict in Southeast Asia escalated into a full-scale war, its unique talents would be in desperately high demand. When the Intruder arrived in Vietnam, it was thrust into a brutal and unforgiving war. The initial loss rate was high, a grim cocktail of mechanical failures in a new and complex machine pilot inexperience with its demanding low-level flight profile and the increasingly lethal North Vietnamese air defenses. For every story of success, like the Quang Bi raid, there was a story of tragedy. But it was in this crucible that the true character of the Intruder and its crews was forged. Just 9 days after the triumphant Quang Bi strike on April 27, 1966, the razor's edge of A-6 operations was laid bare. An intruder from VA-85 was screaming low over the coast, its crew intent on attacking enemy barges north of the city of Vinh. Suddenly, the cockpit was filled with the sharp, deafening crack of an enemy round, impacting the airframe. The bullet tore through the fuselage and struck the pilot, Lieutenant Bill Westerman, inflicting grievous wounds. His bombardier navigator, Lieutenant Brian Weston, saw his pilot slump over the controls, blood blossoming on his flight suit. Acting on pure instinct, born of endless training, Weston reached across the cramped cockpit, seized the control stick, and fought to keep the wounded jet airborne. Landing was impossible. Bailing out over land meant certain capture and a grim fate in a North Vietnamese prison camp. Their only hope, their only chance was the sea. Weston pointed the Intruder east toward the relative safety of the Gulf of Tonkin, buying them precious miles with every second the engines kept running. Westerman was fading in and out of consciousness, in no condition to save himself. After jettisoning the canopy, which filled the cockpit with a deafening, terrifying roar of wind, Weston realized the horrific truth of his situation. In an act of incredible presence of mind and selfless courage, he reached over, grabbed his friend's ejection handle, and pulled it, sending Westerman tumbling out of the crippled aircraft and into the sky. Only then did Weston pull his own. A rescue helicopter was on the scene, quickly hoisting Weston from the churning water. Dripping and exhausted, his first thoughts were for his pilot. He directed the rescuers back along the Intruder's flight path until they spotted Westerman floating and barely conscious. The helicopter had no rescue swimmer to assist the stricken pilot into the rescue sling. Without a moment's hesitation, Brian Weston dove back into the ocean, swam to his wounded friend, fought to secure him in the rescue sling, and waved the helicopter away, screaming at them to get Westerman to urgent medical care. He treaded water alone until a second helicopter arrived 5 minutes later to rescue him for a second time. For his extraordinary valor, Brian Weston was awarded the Navy Cross, the first of 14 such awards earned by Intruder crewmen during the war. His actions encapsulated the profound bond that defined the A-6 community. As the war progressed, the North Vietnamese adapted. Their air defense network, fed by Soviet technology and Chinese manpower, became the most formidable in history. The skies around the strategic choke points of Hanoi and Haiphong were a dense, lethal forest of AKA, and most terrifyingly, the SA-2 Guideline surface-to-air missile. On the night of October 30th, 1967, Lieutenant Commander Charlie Hunter and his bombardier navigator, Lieutenant Lyle Bull, were tasked with a mission that bordered on suicidal, a single-plane nighttime attack on the heavily defended Red River ferry docks in Hanoi. This target was a linchpin in the city's logistics. An earlier daylight raid by a large strike package had been torn apart by the defenses and had failed. Taking off from the USS Constellation, they flew into the heart of the beast. Their A-6A was loaded with 13 Make 82 500-pound snake-eye bombs, whose retarding fins allowed for extremely low-level delivery without the aircraft being caught in its blast. Bull later recalled the chilling intelligence briefing their target was protected by an estimated 20 SA-2 sights and over 600 anti-aircraft guns of various calibers. Hunter used the terrain like a shield, weaving his Intruder through valleys to mask their approach from radar. Bull's eyes were glued to his radar scope, his hands a blur on the controls, marking waypoints and keeping them on a razor-thin path. About 20 miles from the target, they had to leave the cover of the mountains and cross open country, the world erupted. Intelligence reported the SA-2 couldn't track below 1,500 feet, Bull recalled with the dry understatement of a combat veteran. We were disturbed to see that their assessment was incorrect. The sky was suddenly filled with the fiery trails of ascending SAMs, looking like telephone poles of fire racing towards them. Despite flying below 500 feet, they were being targeted. Hunter, a master of his craft, reacted instantly. He threw the intruder into a violent, high-speed barrel roll. The G-forces pressed them deep into their seats as the world outside became a spinning blur of darkness and tracer fire. The missiles, unable to follow the vicious, unpredictable maneuver, streaked past them and detonated harmlessly in the night. He then dropped the A-6 down to a breathtaking 50 feet off the ground, so low they could feel the pressure wave of the air against the terrain. Amidst this chaos, Bull remained ice cold. He kept his head down, focused on his scope, calmly acquired the target, made his final adjustments, and picked the bombs. As the snake eyes fell toward the docks, Hunter was already wrenching the A-6 into a hard, jinking egress. They made it back to the Constellation without a single scratch. For their incredible skill and bravery, both men were awarded the Navy Cross. They would both go on to become rear admirals, their legendary raid a textbook example of the A-6's potential in the hands of a skilled and daring crew. While high-profile strikes against Hanoi were dramatic, the intruder's most relentless and perhaps most strategically significant work was done in the dark, tangled jungles of Laos and Cambodia. Here, the North Vietnamese operated the Ho Chi Minh Trail, a complex network of roads, paths, and waterways that was the logistical lifeblood of their war effort in the South. By day, the trail was largely dormant. But at night, it came alive with convoys of Soviet-built Molotov trucks transporting troops, ammunition, and supplies. For these convoys, the A-6 Intruder became a nocturnal terror. Its moving target indicator system, a specialized mode of the Digital Integrated Attack Navigation Equipment radar, could detect the subtle Doppler shift of moving vehicles against the stationary background of the jungle. A typical road hunting mission was a patient, deadly game. An intruder crew would patrol a known segment of the trail for hours, flying in the dark, their eyes scanning the green radar screen for the telltale flicker of movement. Once a convoy was detected, the A-6 would pounce. They would often drop cluster bomb unit canisters first. These would explode above the convoy, scattering hundreds of smaller bomblets that would puncture fuel tanks, shred tires, and set off ammunition, starting fires that would illuminate the entire area. The intruder would then circle back, using the fires as aiming points for devastating follow-up attacks with high-explosive bombs. The North Vietnamese truck drivers grew to fear the muted, unseen drone of the intruder's engines, knowing it could mean instant annihilation with practically no warning. For all its triumphs, the intruder community was not immune to profound loss. August 21, 1967, stands as one of its darkest chapters. 4 A-6As from VA-196 launched from the Constellation for a daylight strike against the Duc Noi Railroad Yard, a key target north of Hanoi. The mission was cursed from the start. The weather was abysmal, a soup of thunderstorms and thick clouds that shrouded the mountains. En route, one plane was hit by flak, but the crew, determined, pressed on. As they approached the target, they flew into a confused melee. A nearby strike by United States Air Force F-105 Thunder Chiefs was underway, and the radio channels were choked with frantic calls of Mayday as two thuds were shot down. As the intruders began their attack dives, a SAM lanced through the clouds and struck the lead aircraft flown by Commander Leo Profilet, a respected Korean War veteran. The plane exploded into a ball of fire. Profilet and his bombardier navigator, Lieutenant Bill Hardman, were seen to eject. The remaining three planes, now scattered and disoriented in the storm, raced for the coast. Only one made it back to the carrier. The other two vanished. A chilling broadcast from Radio Peking soon revealed their fate. The Chinese government announced it had shot down two United States Navy planes that had strayed over their border in the confusion. One of the crewmen, bombardier navigator, Lieutenant Robert James Flynn, survived and was taken prisoner by the Chinese, where he would endure more than 5 years of brutal solitary confinement. In a single mission, VA-196 had lost 3 aircraft and 6 crewmen, all either killed or captured. It was a devastating blow that sent shockwaves through the entire naval aviation community, a stark reminder of the unforgiving nature of their war. The side-by-side seating of the A-6 was more than just an engineering choice. It created a unique culture and an unbreakable bond. With 2 guys sitting side by side, you could communicate with hand gestures, if need be, recalled Commander Robert Roop Owens. You could simply look at the other guy and nod. This nonverbal communication was vital in the high-stress environment of combat. Marine Corps pilot Bruce Byram, who flew over 3,000 hours in the A-6, praised the critical role of his bombardier navigator. While the pilot wrestled with the physical act of flying, especially during a terrifying night carrier landing, the bombardier navigator was the mission manager. He monitored radios, watched airspeeds, power settings, and rates of descent. He had as much to do with the pilot's success as the pilot, Byram recalled. This created a profound sense of teamwork and camaraderie, a shared destiny in a cramped 2-man world. The toughness of the airframe, a product of Grumman's ironworks philosophy, was also legendary. Byram recalled a daylight mission where a squadron mate's A-6 took a direct hit from Choe that tore a barrel-sized hole in the right wing. The bombardier navigator could see daylight through the wing, but knowing they were still deep in enemy territory, made a calculated decision not to tell his pilot, fearing he might panic and eject prematurely. Byram flying formation also saw the catastrophic damage, but remained silent on the radio. The crippled intruder, not leaking fuel or hydraulics, flew perfectly and made a safe landing at Da Nang. When the pilot finally got out and saw the gaping hole in his wing, he was so shocked and furious at not being told that he decked his bombardier navigator on the tarmac. Byram wisely kept his canopy shut. "I don't know what he would have done differently," Byram said. He surely did not want to eject. The story, though humorous in hindsight, speaks volumes about the ruggedness of the plane and the complex psychology of combat crews. The Intruder was not a static design. It evolved constantly, adapting to the brutal lessons of the battlefield. The A-6B was a specialized iron hand variant, its cockpit filled with specialized receivers to hunt and destroy enemy SAM sites. The A-6C carried a special Trails Roads interdiction multi-sensor pod, with low-light television and infrared cameras further enhancing its night attack prowess against the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The KA-6D was a tanker variant, a flying gas station that extended the range and loiter time of other carrier aircraft, becoming an unsung and indispensable hero of carrier operations. The ultimate version, the A-6E, was introduced in the early 1970s and equipped with the target recognition and attack. Multi-sensor turret, integrated laser designators, and forward-looking infrared with a vastly improved radar and navigation system. The A-6E kept the Intruder a premier frontline strike aircraft for decades. The A-6E served with distinction through the rest of the Cold War flying missions over Lebanon and Libya, and playing a pivotal role in Operation Desert Storm in 1991, where its crews once again took on the toughest, most heavily defended targets. It was finally retired from service in 1997, a victim of post-Cold War budget cuts and the high maintenance costs of its aging airframes. When the Vietnam War ended, the A-6 had flown over 35,000 combat sorties. The Navy and Marine Corps lost 92 A-6 aviators in Southeast Asia, and 53 others became prisoners of war. Each loss was a tragedy, but the numbers are a testament to the aircraft's survivability in the face of unprecedented danger. The A-6 Intruder was never the prettiest or the fastest jet on the carrier deck. It was a workhorse, a brute, a weapon built for a single grim purpose. It was the aircraft that took on the missions no one else could in the places no one else would go, in weather that kept other planes on the ground. Its legacy is not just in its mission logs or technical specifications. It lives on in the stories of the men who flew it. Men who placed their lives in the hands of their partner and the complex glowing green heart of the Digital Integrated Attack Navigation Equipment System. As Rear Admiral James Seeley stated, "In my opinion, the A-6 was the most effective strike aircraft the United States Navy had during the Vietnam War. It was the only true all-weather aircraft in the fight." For the pilots and bombardier navigators who flew it, the cramped side-by-side cockpit was a sanctuary of trust, and their chariot was the A-6 Intruder. They were the men who owned the night.